My dad got remarried when I was 13 years old, 8 years ago now. That marriage was the sort of soap opera disaster you see in bad shows. He had divorced my mom 4 years before, and his new wife, let's call her Susie, was not some hapless after-wedding girl. No, she was his mistress when he was still married to my mother. Classy, right? My mom was smarter than that and came out the other side of the divorce a much better person. Well, to be fair, as much as I like the fact that I even exist, I sometimes wish she never had married my father in the first place. But life is fiddly, and that is where we got stuck. And my dad was an infidelity that could not be justified if they weren't perfect. When you don't like someone in your marriage, either you work at it or you quit, not muck around. Susie, though, was another whole tier of awful. She was one of those people who might be lovely in public but a monster behind closed doors. She made my siblings and I very well known from day one. She ridiculed us, she denigrated us, and she did everything possible to make us feel alien in her home. The worst part, she was a pharmacist. You wouldn't have guessed she had much compassion, but she teased me for taking pills for my psych. Can you imagine? The woman who gave me pills at work made fun of me for needing them. My father, blinded by Susie's beauty and the fact that she was 10 years younger, had no time for it. She slapped him with her finger and he never said a word to her. Only when they discussed the possibility of having a child did he ever hear us talk about her. My brother, a rare stroke of brilliant strategy, had said unambiguously to my dad that if they had kids, he'd ask our mother to sue her for full custody of us. And that must have hit a nerve because the baby plans were put on the back burner. And so, one day they got married. I wasn't very happy to be included in it, and, unsurprisingly, Susie didn't really have any friends to form her bridal party. She had me and my sister hired as bridesmaids along with her own sister. My brother, as you can see in the video, got rigged as best man because Susie wasn't a fan of my dad's real best friend. And that friendship went all in due to the wedding drama. It was an unsettling thing to watch this uncle who had been in my life since I was a kid get snubbed by Susie's shit. And the wedding was, well, nothing too special. The wedding was boring but thankfully short. Then there was the party. Here is where it started to get interesting. And it all started with the chocolate fountain. Part 2, the incident. Imagine we're in the reception room with all the guests and taking family pictures against a fancy chocolate fountain. To the outside world, we would have been a blurred family. But everyone who knew us, anybody who knew us, would have caught the flim-flam. My father was giggling in there blind to the resentment of his own kids. And Susie played the plastic bride with her plastic smile. Okay, now I have autism. I've never been good with my eyes, and this goes for the camera as well. One photo session had me staring just slightly to the side because the photographer made me do a retake. And that's when Susie came up and uttered something disgusting in my ear. So cold that I couldn't breathe. She used the R word. I won't quote it here, but you know the poison it was. There I was a little over the top. I had endured Susie's abuse for years, but this was the straw that broke the camel's back. She was going to pay, and I did not mind how small the amount. It wasn't just revenge that should be drunk cold. Revenge would be drunk chocolate. Nobody was bothered when I tipped the chocolate fountain a tiny bit over to the side of the table. It was a delicate operation. Not that I needed it to be obvious, but also that the fountain should spill just right. Several minutes of small tinkering and then it was time. The base of the fountain hit the back of Susie's Adobe, pure white wedding gown. But then the chocolate started to drip, and the first few sips were invisible. Someone then pointed out the stain, which spread. Susie's face bled a red hue because she knew what had happened. In her world, it must have been an accidental blip. To everybody else it was all in their head. But I knew what was real, and that made me feel redeemed. There was no spare dress for Susie, and no remedy for the stain. And it was there for the rest of the night. A visible scar on the happy day of her life. The black blot on her gown, every time she moved, provoked looks and intimations. The first dance, the cutting of the cake, the speeches, it all got lost in that mark. Part 3, the aftermath. What transpired from the chocolate disaster was everything I had imagined and more. Susie was furious, of course, but she couldn't blame anyone. She was supposed to have guessed me, she's known me for a while, but nothing happened. My father, dumb as a rock, put it down to an accident. Guests talked about it for weeks, and it was a family rumor. I still remember that day, years later, with satisfaction. Susie got her just deal, and it was a poetic one. Not an epic insurrection, but enough to tell a story. It was a perfect reminder, for someone who for years had been making me feel small and insignificant, that behavior pays. The mark pseudo never came out. Susie kept the dress, and probably would have made a return one day. But the chocolate wasn't having it. And she has to see that dress and be reminded of what happened. And that is, for me, the best punishment of all. So there you have it. So that is the tale of how I transformed a chocolate fountain into a weapon of justice. That is not what I am very proud of, but it is also not something I hate. Some days you have to rebel against your bullies, even if it takes some getting creative. And if that inspiration involves dessert centerpiece, oh well, great.